Hi, my name is Jyoti Contreras Herrera, and I am a Sports Medicine 3 student at South Tahoe High School. And for my second project, I got motion analysis, so I chose to focus on motion analysis for a bench press. For my project, I chose to work with Alan Rodriguez. He is a senior at South Tahoe High School, and he is on the STHS boys varsity soccer team. He has been playing soccer for 13 years now, however, he has only been working out at a gym for about 7 months. And his reasoning for joining my project is he wanted to see the type of training he should be focusing on during a bench press. So for my motion analysis project, I chose to do something a little different. I worked with Coach Elliott and we used something called velocity-based training to determine Alan's training type while he's doing a bench press. While we used a product from GymAware, and this product can be used during a certain exercise, and one of the many things it can do is measure the velocity and power throughout your reps. All of this is used to determine load for strength training. Also, it uses something called velocity zones to determine the type of training one is doing. So for the first testing, I made Alan bench 50% of his body weight, and that ended up being 95 pounds. So throughout his first rep, his peak power was 456 watts, and his peak velocity was 0.87 meters per second. During his second rep, his peak power was 607 watts, and his peak velocity was 0.88 meters per second. And lastly, during his third rep, his peak power was 709 watts, and his peak velocity was 0.91 meters per second. I actually used these color dots to measure his velocity in the velocity zones chart. So as you can see, during this first testing, he was in the strength over speed zone, meaning while benching 50% of his body weight, he is mainly training strength more than speed. Also, as you can see throughout the reps, he slowly got a little faster with pressing that bar upwards. For the second testing, I made Alan bench 75% of his body weight, which is 145 pounds. We actually see an increase in peak power and a decrease in peak velocity, which is expected due to the fact that we increased the weight. So for his first rep, his peak power was 559 watts and his peak velocity was 0.73 meters per second. During his second rep, his peak power was 678 watts and his peak velocity was 0.84 meters per second. During his third and final rep, his peak power was 702 watts and his peak velocity was 0.88 meters per second. Again, I used these colored dots, and as you can see, during his first rep he was training in the accelerated strength zone. Meanwhile, his last two reps, he was in the strength over speed zone. During the third and final testing, I made Alan bench press 100% of his body weight, which is 190 pounds. And this is where we really see the difference in the type of training he is doing. During his first rep, his peak power was 604 watts, and his peak velocity was 0.59 meters per second. During his second rep, his peak power was 709 watts, and his peak velocity was 0.71 meters per second. And lastly, during his third rep, his peak power was 770 watts, and his peak velocity was 0.74 meters per second. However, during his third rep, he did need a little help from his spa, so that had an effect on the measurements. So they weren't 100% accurate. And you can see that during this last rep, his spot has to go in and help him rack that weight. So using these color dots, again, we can see that during this last testing, he was only in the accelerated strength zone. So in conclusion, we can see based off the velocity zones, Alan starts off in the strength over speed zone, but as the weight gets heavier, he slowly starts dropping into that accelerated strength zone, meaning he is focusing more on power than speed during his exercise. Thank you so much for watching my presentation.